Hi, everyone. Welcome and good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us virtually today. My name is Hala Alawi, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I am so pleased to welcome you to today's live author reading of new thrillers. We'll be hearing from Gregory N. Whitis, reading from 8 Minutes, a novel released on October 16th. Richard P. Wenzel, author of The Writer in Tuscany, a novel released on February 4th, and Doc Richter, author of Russian Bride, a novel released on March 4th. All three authors' books can be purchased both from online retailers and from select bookstores. And of course, the books can be ordered on Atmosphere Press's website. That's at atmospherepress.com/book. I'm also going to put links directly to all three books straight in the chat for everybody. At the end of today's event, we will have time for audience questions. So during the readings, if you've got a question for one or more of our authors, go ahead and type those in the chat and I'll make sure they get asked. Please do stay muted for the duration of the event, but feel free to use the chat for any praise and comments in addition to questions. One last note is that we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. If you have a manuscript of your own, we would love to read it, so submit your work today to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and supporting Greg, Richard, and Doc today. Going to start off with our first reader, who is Gregory N. Whitis. Greg was born in Gainesville, Florida, raised in Dubuque, Iowa, graduated from Iowa State University, and earned a master's of aquaculture at Auburn University. He landed a job as a farm manager on Alabama's largest catfish farm. His church friend and writing mentor, Eileen K. Henderson, suggests that he should write novels about catfish farming. He cranked out Blue Green and Night Hope. Most of his writing epiphanies sprout between bouts of boredom while running. 8 Minutes, the novel we'll be hearing from today, is a gritty, fast-paced romp through a realistic apocalypse. After a massive solar flare wipes out nearly everything more complex than jumper cables, the sun dims and Earth's climate begins to rival that of Mars. The US government, led by a distant presidential successor, takes shelter in a bunker, grappling with life-threatening global conditions as humanity is tossed back into the Stone Age. Let's now welcome Greg.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And Hala, thank you for putting this on. I'm going to read from 8 Minutes, of course, and I want to show you the nifty cover here. I mean, Atmosphere Press did a great job making the cover. And I'm going to start off at the very front of the book. There's a glossary at the end for those who haven't leaped out of a perfectly good airplane at 30,000 feet at 4 in the morning in minus 20-degree temperatures. For those that have, check the list anyway and rekindle the memories. This is a work of sheer fiction. Names, characters, and incidents are the product of the author's incredibly vivid imagination. Semblance to actual persons and events is coincidental. Oddly enough, the overriding sensation I got looking at Earth was, my God, that little thing is so fragile out there. Mike Collins, Apollo 11 astronaut. Our sun dims and brightens from time to time. A 1% change would be catastrophic. The coldest temperature ever recorded on Earth was a negative 144 degrees Fahrenheit. The lowest surface temperature on Mars is 195 degrees Fahrenheit minus. Alchemy is a medieval science combined with speculative philosophy purporting the transformation of elements. Today's scientists don't waste their time on alchemy. The sun has been converting hydrogen to helium for 5 billion years. Unlike hydrogen, helium doesn't burn. According to theoretical astrophysics, the sun should last another 5 billion years. These theories are rooted in alchemy. Go ahead and reread the above. Take a deep breath. It takes 8 minutes for energy from the burning of hydrogen to leave the sun and reach Earth. What you just read is not science fiction. What follows is not science fiction. Enjoy the next sunrise. It may be the last. Part 1, Global Weirding in the Superflare, August. Chapter 1, Alexandria, Virginia. The first rays of an August dawn filtered through the massive white oak in the gated neighborhood. Bo, the household's golden retriever, nuzzled Alex Tate's bent elbow. Tate squinted at the trickle of light coming through the closed Venetian blinds. Bo, lay down. Bo jumped, planting his heavy front paws on Tate's chest. Tate rubbed his eyes, staring at his dog. What's got into you? His wife, Tally, stirred. What's going on? Bo needs to go out, but it's dark outside. She rolled over, groping for her Garmin Forerunner on a nightstand. Not even 5 yet. Alex slipped the sheet off and stumbled into the hallway, Bo at his heels. He opened the front door and Bo darted out. Alex folded his arms across his chest, noticing the chill in the air. Bo didn't sniff out his usual spot for relief, but instead urinated in several places along the yard's perimeter. What's all that about? As Bo returned to the door, Tate glanced at the digital display for his amateur weather station next to the doorframe. The screen indicated falling temperatures, rising barometric pressure, and a steady east breeze. That's strange. A combination of increasing pressure and winds out of the east. Usually, east winds were a portent of impending storms and falling pressure, and it had turned unseasonably cool. He checked the battery indicator on the bottom edge of the screen. The lithiums were 5 by 5. Bo waddled past him and lay by the rear patio door, peering outside, seemingly waiting for the sunrise. NASA headquarters, Science Mission Directorate, Washington, D.C. Director and Nobel Prize laureate Dr. Emil Basser stared at the new spectroheliograph photo from Zurich by his beloved Nobel collaborator, Boris Spitz. The profound anguish as his face mirrored the look of a man staring at a pistol barrel aimed between the eyes. The hammer was dropping in slow motion. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and stared at the picture again. They were still there, thicker and darker than usual. Sunspots thickly coalesced over the surface. The corona was shrinking. The sun's visible surface, the photosphere, was cooling off at a cataclysmic pace. The paper Spitz co-authored with him 40 years ago and presented at an annual International Astrophysics Conference was considered far-fetched by their peers. It was based on conjecture and poorly supported by corroborating science. The academic world of astrophysics was hyper-theoretical, off limits to laymen. Their fellow cosmic scientists considered the paper almost heretical. It was happening. The sun released energy while converting hydrogen into helium. The sun consumed 4 million tons of hydrogen every second for the past 5 billion years. According to the Basser-Spitz theory, the phase shift would start at the core if the hydrogen atom converted to a lower energy hydrogen-helium isotope due to the constant intense heat of 14 million degrees in a hyperspeed thermonuclear chain reaction. The new hybrid isotope would burn at a much lower temperature, if at all. In effect, the sun would burn out or become a red star, or something in between, the mother of all eclipses in terms of going dark, and it'd be the last one. Basser realized what would happen next. 7 billion people would die in a matter of days. By the end of the week, they'd be frozen solid. Life for the survivors, and icy hell. He looked out at his staff through his office picture window. They were staring at him. He was their trusted leader. They worshiped the ground he walked on. Just passing through his energetic shadow gave them the daily motivation to fight the traffic, dash through the criminal-infested ghetto 2 blocks over, and worry if their cars would be there after work. Their day's highlight was bringing him a cup of coffee, sharing fresh Krispy Kremes, or just sitting at the same table for lunch. If your resume listed that you had worked under Emil Basser, greener pastures were over the next hill. His administrative assistant, Betty Gale Stewart, dabbed at her eyes with a Kleenex. She had printed the email from his friend in Zurich. Basser slowly got up from his chair, pushed it into the desk cavity, and walked solemnly to the threshold of his office. Y'all need to go home, hug your loved ones, and find peace with God. That's all I want to say. Dr. Basser, how much time is left? Asked Stewart. Maybe a week or two. He removed his reading glasses, perched on the end of his ruddy nose, and wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Anguished gasps filled the room. Their leader turned around and walked to the exterior picture window. He faced the morning sun. Yes, it did look different. Within minutes, the office cleared out. Some of his staffers bawled in sheer anguish. A few screamed as they ran down the corridor. Basser sat back down at his desk. He opened a drawer on his right side. He found the framed picture of his late wife, Tony. She died 3 months before pancreatic cancer. He took the picture out, methodically folding out the stand. He placed it on top of the photos of the dying son. He opened the left-hand drawer and grabbed a chrome-plated Cobra Derringer. Honey, I'm coming. He stuck the barrel in his mouth and pulled the trigger. How we doing on time, Halo?
Great. I think actually, like, you still have 5 minutes if you want
Okay,
to keep going.
great. Chapter 2. The building security force had bailed. NASA headquarters was almost void of human life by 9 a.m. Mick Moore had stayed. Evicted from his one-bedroom studio 2 weeks before, he covertly took up residence in a 1970s Airstream in their rarely used storage basement. The trailer was once used to quarantine the first Apollo astronauts upon their return to Earth. At the time, the government was worried about the crew harboring moon germs. The aluminum cocoon was scheduled to be refurbished and hauled to the Smithsonian. It served as free government housing for Moore. He paid the day shift security detail $100 a week to keep the lodging arrangement secret. The only issue was staying quiet and unlit during the night shift. The night guards were clueless. Moore stared at the body of his boss, face down, slumped over in his chair. A clot of crimson blood plugged a half-dollar-sized hole at the back of Dr. Basser's head. Pinkish brain matter spotted the chair's headrest. A skull fragment, ringed with white hair, was wedged in the doctor's blue shirt collar. The real-life version of CSI, Moore's favorite teledrama, started a wave of nausea. He tasted the morning's biscuits and lumpy gray gravy all over again. Moore nearly jumped out of his skin when Basser's desk phone rang. He debated answering. On the fifth ring, he picked up. Hello, Moore said softly. Who's speaking? Asked a gruff voice on the other end. Parker Mission Specialist Mick Moore. Abe Natale, National Security Council Director. Need to speak with Dr. Basser. Sir, he's dead. What the hell? When did this happen? About 10 minutes ago. He shot himself. Jesus! There was a brief silence. Moore heard Natale telling others. He came back on the line. Moore, who's next in charge? It had to be Dr. Alex Tate, Assistant Director. He's not here. He's home on family leave. Need his home address now. Moore looked through a stuffed Rolodex on Vassar's desk. He thumbed through the T's and found A. Tate, 189 Persimmon Lane, Alexandria. Moore read the address. Natalia repeated the location out loud for confirmation. Moore stared at the body as the man spoke on the other end. Blood oozed out of the jagged hole. You got it, sir, Moore said softly. Natalia hung up abruptly. Spinning around in his plush leather chair, he barked at the NSC agent posted at his West Wing office door. Senior Agent Hans Jupp entered his office. Sir, get a car to NASA Assistant Director Alex Tate's residence ASAP. Highest priority. Get him on a secure line. Call me when you have him in custody. Here's his address. Natalie handed a sticky note to the agent. Custody, sir? Yeah, damn it, custody. Yes, sir. How's
Thank
that?
you. Yeah, thank you so much, Greg. And thank you for really introducing us to the story from the beginning like that. I think it really threw us in the best way possible. So thank you. Our next reader for today is Richard P. Wenzel. Richard is an internationally recognized infectious diseases specialist and editor at large for the New England Journal of Medicine. An emeritus professor in the Department of Internal Medicine at Virginia Commonwealth University, he has penned numerous critical op-eds in the New York Times, Boston Globe, LA Times, and more recently, several insightful essays on the COVID-19 pandemic in The Hill. He has written a nonfiction work, Stalking Microbes, and two medical thrillers, Labyrinth of Terror and Dreams of Troy. Today, we'll be hearing him read from The Writer in Tuscany, where tranquil life in a Tuscan villa and vineyard ends abruptly as a malevolent plot unfolds targeting regional vintners. Caught in the crossfire are diverse international guests, each seeking solitude for personal reasons. Richard, take it away.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank everyone who's listening in. I thought I'd begin by just telling a little bit about the book and then a little bit about me as a writer, my heroes in literature, and the advice that I've taken from some of them. So, briefly, my story is a mystery set in the beautiful hills of Tuscany with many references to Italian culture, not just cuisine and wine, but art, history, and social movements. Many of you know I'm a physician who loves to write. Some of my heroes, and probably yours, are also author physicians, include the English poet John Keats, creator of Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle, Michael Crichton, and Abraham Verghese, and many others. The very famous Russian physician author, playwright, short story writer, Anton Chekhov humorously articulated the roles of medicine and writing. Medicine is my lawful wife, literature my mistress. When I get tired of one, I spend the night with the other. I'm sorry I can't have dinner with him. I would love to have that time with him. You may think that Chekhov meant to show respect for both parts. More likely, he meant it's possible to have multiple avocations and passions that flourish simultaneously, even when they appear to compete with each other. A great teacher also, Chekhov admonishes inspiring writers to make words count, to avoid fluff. If an author in chapter 1, for example, describes a room with a gun mounted on the wall, the gun better go off in chapter 2 or 3. No fluff. Words have meaning. Hold that thought for a second about the importance of words. A modern author today, George Saunders, is a renowned professor, creative writing program at Syracuse University. Some of you may have read his book, Lincoln and Nabardo, a special take on President Lincoln's grief at the time of his son's Willie's death. He has a wonderful book on writing called A Swim in the Pond in the Rain about how to read like a writer. He suggests taking one page at a time when you read. Ask yourself a series of questions. On that page, what did you learn? Where's the story going? Are there details you considered why they were mentioned? Let me read from the beginning of my book, The Writer in Tuscany. So this is chapter 1. Clapping the black batante against the walnut door, Eric scanned the apricot hills and smelled farmland, pasture, and burning brush. No one answered the knocking. He turned to the piano sounds of insects, and in the soft breeze imagined the fading sunflowers averting their eyes from the stranger he was. A woman dressed in black moved slowly against the sunflowers. Her veil fell to her shoulders. After a 10-minute walk lined with cypress trees from the vineyard's entrance to the office, he unfurled his arms. The vast velvet clusters of grapes hung pregnant, anticipating fall's harvest. He placed his backpack on the fractured slate surface. Untamed grass poked through the cracks of the slate and adjacent brick walkway. He hoped the remaining luggage would be delivered when the airline retrieved his two lost bags. Si, signore. Old Mr. Swanson from America, the news reporter who wants to write a book. We expected you over an hour ago. Introducing himself as a part-time manager, Alberto was in his 30s, unshaven, with a wrinkled white shirt, tan pants. I apologize for the delay. I got tied up filling out forms after my luggage failed to arrive at the Florence airport. Unfortunately, breakfast is over. It's past noon. We have strict hours of 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. There is a restaurant 2 kilometers away in Il Vantaggio, our town. But I should first show you your room. Passing him the chiavetta, Alberto warned, you'll need to return the key to the office whenever you leave. At night, there's a watchman. Alberto led Eric down the narrow hallway. Il Percorso was originally a horse farm. It's over 100 years old, Mr. Swanson. The owner's father-in-law converted it into 6 flats encircling our cobblestone courtyard. She and her husband made a number of enhancements in the last 5 years. Eric opened the door and tossed the backpack onto the soft yellow frayed couch. He explored the 2 main rooms. A separate bathroom had an adjacent alcove hosting a microwave, espresso machine, and half-size refrigerator. A rust-colored back door with a center window faced the courtyard. Alberto followed. Is the flat okay? The room's fine. I placed the map, phone numbers, and important places to visit on the table by the couch, including restaurants and stores. May I ask what you write about, Mr. Swanson? Well, people say you write about what you know. I'm a crime reporter. I have a mystery in mind. I hope you enjoy your stay. Do you have a family? No, I'm alone. When I get to meet the owner of the vineyard pretty soon, perhaps soon, you may have seen her walking among the sunflowers. At some convenient time, I'd love to talk to someone about grapes and wine. No time for that now. We're preparing for the harvest. I understand. After I settle in, I'll walk to the restaurant and nearby store for some food, coffee, and wine to keep here. The walk will do me good. I've been sitting a long time, no workout for a few days. Just be careful, Mr. Swanson. Not all vendors like American tourists, especially at the end of the summer crowds. Some of your countrymen don't respect our culture and properties. Tell them you're staying at Il Percorso. They buy the owner's wine and have known her for years. I'll be sure they say that you sent me. By the way, how many rooms are rented? Any other Americans? No Americans, but all rooms will be occupied the end of the week. You're our longest renter. You may run into others at breakfast. Once a week, we have a wine tasting for everyone here. That sounds delightful. I noticed 2 dogs on the way up the villa. They're formidable. Are they the owners? Yes, both are cane corsos, a large Italian breed, friendly but intensely protective. So in chapter 1, let me just ask a couple questions. Why the description of disrepair, failure of maintenance? What do you think happened? Why mention lost luggage? What insights into Eric's personality described as someone who imagines the fading sunflowers averting their eyes from him, a stranger? Why mention 2 large Italian dogs, cane corsos? Will they appear in the future as friendly and protective? Are they the equivalent of Chekhov's gun on the wall? Will they go off in the future? Why? I can assure you that the guns will go off. A key point For better writing, one that all teachers state repeatedly, don't tell the reader, show something to the reader. More fluently, mellifluously, listen to one of my heroes, Anton Chekhov. Don't tell me the moon is shining. Show me the glint and the light on broken glass. His advice is beautiful. Now jump ahead to chapter 13. Entering the dining room, Eric waved to Ava. She wore a black apron, a pink blouse, and wide smile. I've set up a table in the courtyard. The weather is so beautiful. Sounds delightful. I'll bring coffee and breakfast. We have scrambled eggs and pepperoni as well as the usual fare. Eric sat at the courtyard table. Butterflies, in their joyous errands, clung with tremulous flutters to nearby wildflowers. That's an Adonis blue, Mr. Eric, sipping from an alpine aster. The one to your right, resting on the chrysanthemum, he's a band of orange spots on the edges of its wings. It's a brown argus. Both are common this time of year. How do you know about butterflies? My mother's a botanist. She loves butterflies. Now so do I. We spend a lot of time when she's home, free from her international research projects. This place is wonderful, Eva. Great weather, colorful butterflies at breakfast, the first taste of coffee in the morning. Tuscany has all that, yes. It makes such a comfortable place. That's why it's so discomforting to me. Oh? Sometimes I feel like I'm caught in this town, missing so much. I have an idea to do more, perhaps study biology, maybe teach. You're still young, Ava. I'm sure you'll find your way. You may find an attractive young man here who will change your life and still allow you to grow. I'm not sure. At times, I feel like I'm in the chrysalis phase of the butterfly. I'm protected and safe and comfortable, but maybe there's more out there for me. I guess I want to emerge more fully than to see the world, make it more beautiful, make a difference like my mother. I don't want to feel stuck. Do you know what I'm trying to say, Mr. Eric? I don't want just comfort. I think I do, Ava, and I think you're destined to find your wings. You remind me of a good friend. She used to say, I want to fly. She was in the Peace Corps for a few years, living in Thailand before we met. She wanted to help people. Could you help her, support her? Well, for a while. Thanking Eric, she turned to the kitchen. Eric walked to the courtyard door of the flat, reflecting on transitions. Chapter 14. And Eric wandered in the vineyard and among the sunflowers. On the way, he was met by clusters of fig trees, sensing their milky, dusty scent. The yellowish green figs bent the stalks with their ripeness. He bit into the red, rich and sweet flesh of one. Once you smelled our white Tirana figs, you'll never forget our villa. The smell of grapes and figs will always remind you of the hills of Tuscany. Maria waited 10 pieces ahead, close to the vines, dressed in black mourning. I've already had trouble remembering my home. Are the figs close to harvest? Yes, in 1 or 2 weeks. Every fall is also a great time for most of our grapes, especially in those facing the western sun. We planted our rows north and south to take advantage of the differences in taste between those in the east and west exposures. It's obvious that you love what you do. Giovanni, my husband, loved it. That is part of why I wish to maintain the vineyard in excellent fashion. He especially adored the harvest, sleeping only a few hours a night. I want to keep his memory and passion alive. I haven't found peace yet, so I work even harder. She walked away. I hope you have a relaxing time in the vineyard. Today is beautiful to take photographs of the vines. We'll do some harvesting within a week. Two muscular cane corsos raced in front of Maria. Their black masks, pointed ears, and powerful torsos broadcast their tough temperament. She gave treats to each. Go, play. Off they ran. Maria was a beautiful person with a big heart, tragically stuck in the time frame for 2 years. Did his admiration of her reflect a fear of being stuck in his own dark shadows? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you. I love that you kind of pose those almost like um, these questions to sort of think about as we're listening to the reader. I think that was fantastic.
Great.
So our final reader for today is going to be Doc Richter. Doc has received national writing awards for his novels and is president of the San Antonio Writers Guild and past president of the California Writers Club. He's an active member of the Writers League of Texas. Dr. Richter moderates a weekly multi-state online critique session and is an international writing contest judge. Doc has written 7 novels and is now working on his 8th. Today, in the novel we'll be hearing from Russian Bride, Natalia and Jake knew a foreign marriage would be challenging, but neither foresaw it would lead to murder. In Russian Bride, we witness the lengths to which ordinary people in love will go to save their family. We'll hear more of the story now from Doc himself.
Okay, thank you very much, Gail. Starting at chapter 1, Moscow, post-Soviet perestroika, 1993. The ancient trolley rumbled down the center of Cherkasov Street toward the general area of Natalia Melnikova's building. Absorbed in thought, she was in high spirits despite the other commuters' impassive faces. People had long learned to hide their thoughts and emotions, but they couldn't mask their eyes. The eyes around her showed despair and anger, but the feelings of others wouldn't depress her mood, not that night. She enjoyed January's freezing cold as much as the springtime. At this point in the school term, her better piano students pulled away from the ordinary learners. The best pupils' initial clumsiness had passed, and natural talents exerted themselves, which always pleased her. First talent meant hope, rare these days in post-Soviet Russia. Natalia loved music in a nation that adored song, and she possessed a fulfilling job. Of course, teaching didn't pay much, which made her life a struggle. Even doctors only made the equivalent of $50 per month. If she didn't live in her retired mother's small apartment, it would be impossible to survive the crushing inflation and lack of rubles. Inflation ran at 100% per month. When the streetcar groaned to an abrupt, shuddering halt at her stop, she stepped onto the boulevard and searched for oncoming traffic. Automobiles had the right of way, and they took it. Crossing the 3 lanes to the sidewalk was hazardous, worse at night. Most drivers negotiated the dark streets with their headlights off to conserve gasoline. Pedestrians were often hit. Fleets of ambulances cruised the thoroughfares and sought to find a prize before a competing unit arrived. Natalia checked up and down the street and made her dash. The trek to her building, hidden in a forest of other 12-story structures called a corpus, would take half an hour. Naked trees lined the narrow lane into the complex with decrepit cars and tiny ice-covered portable garages. Many people walked their dogs. Muscovites preferred large ones for personal security. Other people carried sacks for their night's meal and vodka. Almost everyone drank a bottle a night, but Natalia didn't imbibe because of the cost. Natalia kept her brisk pace through the crisp snow and thought about Mr. Jacob Wilder from the United States, and excitement warmed her. He had landed in Moscow and would meet her soon. Natalia thought about her first letter to Mr. Jacob as she referred to him in her mind. She made 15 attempts to write the message. Even then, she didn't believe the words were sufficient to express herself well, but she hoped Mr. Jacob would forgive her limited English. After that came the postage, oh, so much postage, followed by the excruciating wait for his reply. If he wrote her back, but he did reply, and her dreams of a good man soared. But one thing disturbed her. She hadn't been honest with him. The Moscow correspondence agency she used, International Friends, which was one of dozens of such agencies, demanded she lie and not tell Mr. Jacob about her 4-year-old son, Alexander. They said keeping Alexander confidential was necessary to increase her chances for an American gentleman. Natalia would tell Mr. Jacob later if he chose her. She agreed, though believed it was wrong and felt guilt for her deception. She wanted him to be faithful, truthful to her, with her, yet she didn't reciprocate. What will he think of me when I tell him? She worried that he would meet others and didn't want to compete with them, but she appreciated his honesty. He had every right to meet anyone he wanted. He'd come all the way from America, and she'd be a fool to think a man would make such a trip to meet only one woman. But Mr. Jacob told her he liked her letters the best and would spend the most time with her, which made her happy and ever so nervous. Natalia passed through the dark paths to her Khrushchev apartment building, one of thousands of nondescript cement towers erected during the time of a Soviet premier Natalia had only heard about in school. But at least she, Alexander, and her mother had a place to live. So many people from the country came to Moscow to hunt for jobs that housing was in critical supply. There weren't enough places to house Moscow's 9 million residents. A place to live, however small, was needed to survive. She walked into the dim hallway, trudged up 6 flights of stairs, unlocked the door, and was surprised her mother stood in the entryway. Is everything okay, Mama? Alexander? Her mother gave a slight smile and said, the angel sleeps. Her worried brow returned and she handed Natalia a note. This came for you. The note was from the agency and they ordered her to come to their office immediately. But why? I have no time for this. Mr. Jacob is in Moscow and I have much to prepare. She didn't know why they wanted her to come, but had no choice. Natalia looked in on the sleeping Alexander, his toy car clutched in his hand, and gave him a kiss. She grabbed a piece of buttered bread from the kitchen for dinner and started the long walk back through the snow. The further she traveled, the more anxious she became. What does the service want now? Has Mr. Jacob changed his mind about seeing me? Natalia entered the old brick building on Russ Street across the Moscow River from Red Square, stomped the slush off her boots, and climbed the steep concrete steps to the offices. Before, she had waited for her interview in the cramped, cold lobby, but this evening the reception ushered her ahead of the others who sat on hard chairs. The door of the small, poorly lit room closed, and she hesitated. Blue tobacco smoke filled the air from quality foreign cigarettes. A man sat behind a table, his face only partially visible in the shadows. His black leather coat and silk shirt were expensive. Her eyes went to the flash of gold from his wristwatch. He was a new Russian, one of the recent breed everyone despised but wished to become. They were the people who drove Mercedes or Saabs or Jeeps and talked with loud voices in restaurants and flaunted their cellular phones and beepers. They paid policemen outrageous sums to park their fancy autos on the sidewalks to be guarded by those same officers. They displayed their wealth while most people starved. What does such a person want with me? The man took a long drag and his face was illuminated by the cigarette's glow. He had dark hair and looked in his 40s, which is all she saw before the light faded. Sit, he commanded. The KGB was not too far removed from her memory. and he spoke with sharp authority. She sat. The man obscured in the smoky shadows said, Natalia Melnikova, you have corresponded with a Mr. Jacob Wilder. He is in Moscow to see you and 3 other women. Natalia heard the surprise in her voice. How do you know about the others? The man spread his hands and she noticed his smile. We know many things, more than you want, but that is not relevant. What is important is Mr. Wilder chooses you. We don't represent the other ladies because they use other services. You must be the one for him. But what if he doesn't select me? The man's voice turned hard. You don't want to think about the consequences. Jacob Wilder selects you or you will forever weep. He gave her a dismissive wave. That is all for now. Keep your son secret and do what we tell you. Understand? She didn't, but said da, the only answer she could give. Chapter 2. The tram seemed colder, dirtier than earlier, and Natalia felt sick to her stomach. All she dreamed of was a reliable mate, someone different from Vitali, but she hadn't gone to a service for the expected reason of an easier life. She went because she heard men from America were compassionate and caring. They were gentlemen and made fine husbands. Moscow was her home, though she struggled. What she valued most was a good man to share her life with, one who treated her like a lady and appreciate her, and be a real father to Alexander. If she could find such a man in Russia, she would never consider leaving. And Mr. Jacob had landed in Moscow, and she would at long last see him. She thought his arrival would be wonderful and exciting until tonight. Natalia understood the agency man was a mob boy who didn't tell her everything. There had to be more because the mafia always wanted money. Her insides gave a sickening twist. She was poor. Only Mr. Jacobs was have cash for the mafia. The crowded car lurched and halted, though they were not at a regular stop. Word spread through the trolley of a pedestrian lying on the tracks, but she couldn't see through the steamy, mud-covered windows. An ambulance would come to claim the victim, and the passengers would be stuck while the police sorted out the incident. She wished she could talk to someone, anyone, but such conversations were not possible. With whom would she discuss her predicament? Natalia lowered her chin, bit her lip, and tried not to weep. She hated to cry. She willed herself not to. Dmitry Chekhov lit another Marlboro and called for his car. Time to leave the agency and go to his casino on Straskara Street. His personal meetings with Natalia Melnikova and 2 other special women were brief and pleasurable, like the 78 other such encounters he conducted over the past months. He so much relished their desperate fear in the darkened room and savored the US dollars they would make him. Ivan Rublev smiled as he drove his immaculate white Corolla south on Interstate 5 out of Sacramento, California, and into the Central Valley's fog-shrouded farmland. His car wasn't new, but it was in exceptional condition. Automobiles in the US were easier to keep in top working order versus the crap Moscovits and Ladas back home. Americans and Russians both loved their wheels, but here the cars were so much better. The little Toyota was nondescript and quick, ordinary yet reliable, and his long, meaty legs fit well enough. The US offered more than fine autos. Here he lived in a nice apartment, made far more money than possible in Moscow, and was an important man compared to when he had been back home. Everything was superior here. Unfortunately, that included the police. He needed to be careful in the States, not like Moscow, where bribes solved any problem. Russia was the Wild West now that the Soviet Union had collapsed from its inefficient, ponderous weight. These days, gambling, drugs, and extortion flourished. Fine young prostitutes cost $1,000 a night, which mystified Ivan. One night pumping some teenager for what the average Russian earned in 15 years? Craziness, but excellent crazy. The kind of insanity that made his boss, Dmitry Chekhov, rich and brought Ivan to America. Rublev glanced at his image in the rearview mirror. His butch emphasized his large round head. He would never wear his hair this short back home. Too cold. The corners of his blue eyes crinkled in a smile, and he winked at himself as the dormant vineyards slid past. Ivan eased his Toyota onto I-205 at Stockton and turned toward the San Francisco Bay Area. The fields along the highway were frost-covered alfalfa and harvested corn. He faced a full day's drive to check out his target, including the time at the destination, Milpitas. But the trip was most likely worth spending a day in his vehicle. If everything checked out, Mr. Jake Wilder would soon be another easy kill, and more cash would be deposited into Ivan's German account. That's it.
Thank you so much, Doc. And again, another great story to really throw us into. So I think there's a lot of great leads for people to follow up on here. So at this time, we've got time for our audience Q&A. So if you have any questions for one or more of our authors, go ahead and type those in the chat and I'll make sure they get asked. We've already got a couple questions sent in. So this first one is for all three authors. This question is, what was the first idea or moment that set this book in motion for you? I'm thinking we could go in reading order. So Greg, do you want to start us off with this one?
That's an easy one. I got to witness a total solar eclipse in Kentucky back in 2018. I was already working on a novel in progress, Night Hope. And so I just kind of let that solar eclipse kind of fester in my mind for several years. But what I remember about that event was nature just went silent. The birds stopped chirping, and then the insects stopped making their noise, and it got incredibly cool. It was a cloudless day, blue skies, and when that shadow finally covered the sun, it got incredibly cool. And I just remarked to myself that, my God, the energy of that sun and it changing that quickly, there's something going on there. So I started writing about it when I published Night Out.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can just imagine, natural event like that, this kind of phenomenon would be so moving and inspiring in that way. So I can see exactly how that played out. Richard, what about you? What was the first thing that set this book in motion for you?
Well, I do a lot of traveling and have been to Tuscany on many times, and it's probably one of my favorite places on earth. So I wanted to have a story that um, was set in Tuscany and try to draw in the amazing culture that Italians have that go back beyond the Renaissance. And the second part was to start with a theme that I thought would be interesting. Somebody 40 years old needs to get away, hoping to find his aspiration. He's hoping to find a muse that he wants to write a book. And at the same time, he would hope, if it's possible, to leave his emotional baggage at home and find the most tranquil place on earth that he could imagine, a vineyard and a villa. And once he gets there, of course, that tranquility is short-lived, and he gets involved in helping solve a serial killing of vintners.
Yeah, I think especially with such a setting, it makes total sense that that's going to come from those travel experiences and kind of bringing that setting to life. So I think that's also a wonderful influence to be able to see. And then, Doc, what about you? What was it that set this book in motion for you?
Well, I've been very fortunate in that all my stories, just the way I write, I always know what the last line will be before I even start. But I happen to live in a place where I knew a number of men who had married Russian brides and the families that they had. And so when I visualized the story, I actually went to Moscow for a month in January, which was its own insanity. But to get the feel of the place, and, I've been very fortunate in my writing career. I've been able to travel extensively around the globe, and so that was the genesis of the story. So to make the story real, I had to be there.
Absolutely. I mean, it really harkens back to that idea of bringing a setting to life and how do you make that happen in the best way possible. So it's really interesting to see kind of the differences and similarities and, how these books came to life. This next question is again for all three authors. What is the most interesting or bizarre research you've done for your book? Maybe Richard, do you want to start us off with this one?
Well, when you say bizarre thing, I'm not sure. Other than what I wanted, I'm an infectious disease specialist with a degree in epidemiology, so I'm a disease detective, as they often say. And so, in that sense, I was hoping that I might find somebody in Italy. In this case, one of the characters is a detective in a small town near Florence who teams up with my protagonist, Eric, who's a crime reporter. And so, looking into how you might find the connection of a series of presumably unrelated deaths and injuries, and then how they actually have some common things that you finally ferret out. So, as I was thinking about this, this was the kind of thinking behind the plot.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love to hear how those kind of background experiences and expertises will inform the writing. I think that's what sets so many books apart from similar titles. I think that's kind of what makes them so diverse and interesting. Doc, what about you? Was there any particularly interesting or even bizarre research you had to do for
Well, to me, it was all interesting, but none of it was really bizarre. Basically, it was events of the people I knew and what they experienced, and it was a matter of putting the story together to make a thriller out of it. So, no, nothing was particularly bizarre, other than I certainly had a lot of interesting experiences while I was in Moscow that didn't make it into the book, but so nothing what I would consider bizarre.
Fair enough. I think there's a lot of interesting nuggets there anyway. And then Greg, what about you? Any interesting or bizarre research that informed the book?
Well, in order to, the major setting of my book, 8 Minutes, takes place in a presidential bunker that actually exists in southern Pennsylvania. It's called the Raven Rock Mountain Complex. And after finishing a 300-page book on it, I said, man, I got to see this place. Obviously, I knew I wasn't going to be able to get into it because it was a presidential bunker. But this bunker, people, a lot of people don't realize this. This bunker is an underground bunker the size of the White House, and the president has a helicopter pad, and they can get the president from his White House in Washington D.C. to the bunker on Marine One in about 10 minutes. Okay, and my dad and my wife and myself, we drove up the hill in southern Pennsylvania to this bunker, and I found it on Google Earth Pro. And we got right to the gate of the presidential bunker, and we snapped some photos, which we weren't supposed to do, but I had to have some photos for my book setting. Um, but it's a eerie place to be at outside of this presidential bunker. So, and then I also sat in a missile silo, and I physically walked a route between the White House and NASA headquarters for another setting in the book. So I did a lot of research, actual physical research for the book.
Absolutely. Again, I just love hearing about those research processes. I think there's so much interesting things to uncover there. There's just time for one more question, but I really want to hear this from you three because of the genre of these books. This question is, what is the key to building suspense without giving too much away too soon? So Doc, do you want to start us off with this one?
Yeah, well, the key is to have an empathetic character or set of characters where the reader is going to empathize or relate to these folks, and then they get thrown into the maelstrom, if you will, for lack of a better term. So to me, the key is having characters that the person can, you may not understand completely, but it can at least relate to.
Absolutely. It's that human element that makes it so impossible to put down. Richard, what about you? What have you found to be the key to building suspense without giving too much away?
Well, I think what you do is each chapter should end with tension. It has to have tension. And along the way, what I like to do is plant some clues ahead of time without where the reader knows me and knows that I didn't just say someone left their luggage there. Someone's going to say something about luggage later on. Um, or, if there's the rifle hanging on the wall, it's just a statement, but the reader should be asking, now, why has he said that? And before the chapter ends, tension, but not giving away the entire sort of course of where you're headed.
Yeah, I can say as a reader, I love having those clues, especially it really helps with the rereadability of a book. So I'm excited to hear that that's so, forefront in an author's mind. And then closing us out, Greg, what have you found to be the key to building suspense without giving too much away?
Well, the reviews are coming in. People are saying over and over again that it's a page turner, and I've got tension in every chapter. One of my reviewers said, "Man, I had to put this book down for a couple of days. I couldn't stand it anymore. It was just I had to chill out." So I don't know. That's the core of the book is this tension all the way through the book, but unlike other apocalyptic novels, this one this one isn't. It ends in a good way. All right, and I read Cormac McCarthy's The Road, and that guy got away with saying the word gray on every page, and I didn't want my book going that way. I wanted it to be somewhat I had some comic relief in it, so you could deal with some of the tension.
Yeah, it's a funny kind of compliment almost to get from readers, I'm sure, but I think that's a really great testament to how intense things are in the text. So that's certainly intriguing to hear about. So at this time, I just want to say it was so wonderful to hear all three of your books, especially brought to life in the voices of the authors. So thank you so much to Greg, Richard, and Doc for being generous with us and with your time today. Thank you also to everyone in the audience for joining us as well to help us celebrate these authors. Don't forget, of course, that you can order 8 Minutes, The Writer in Tuscany, and Russian Bride from the links in the chat. I'm just going to put them all in there one more time so they're easily accessible. Please also consider checking out atmospherepress.com to browse our new and forthcoming releases, sign up for our email newsletter, or submit a book manuscript of your own. You can submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and just let us know that you attended today's event. We'll look forward to hearing from you, but until then, that's it for today. So have a great rest of your week, everyone.